What just happened today has shifted the balance in the Middle East overnight. A U.S. F-15 fighter jet has been shot down over southern Iran. One crew member, the weapons systems officer, is still missing. The pilot has been rescued, but Iranian security forces are now actively hunting the missing American airman across the region. State media is urging citizens to find him alive and offering rewards for his capture. At the same time, Iran claims it has shot down a second American warplane, an A-10 Warthog, during the rescue mission over the Gulf. The pilot reportedly ejected and was recovered, but the incident confirms the operation itself came under direct fire. Compounding the danger, Iran reports an attack near the Bushehr nuclear power plant that killed at least one person. This is no longer a contained border clash. A U.S. warplane is down inside Iranian territory, a crew member is unaccounted for, and both sides are now operating in the same search space with live weapons. Right now, this changes everything. The risk of miscalculation is extreme. One wrong move in the search for that missing airman could ignite a direct confrontation between U.S. and Iranian forces. Here's what you need to understand. The clock is ticking, and the next few hours will decide whether this remains a rescue operation or becomes something far more dangerous. This confrontation didn't appear from nowhere. In recent weeks, U.S. strikes had already intensified against Iranian-backed positions. The operation that led to the downed F-15 was part of a broader mission targeting assets near sensitive Iranian sites, including areas close to the Bushehr nuclear complex. Verified video circulating online shows the moment the F-15 was engaged and struck. What changed today is the direct hit on American aircraft inside Iranian airspace, followed immediately by Iranian claims of a second shoot-down during the rescue attempt. Key actors are now locked in a dangerous triangle. U.S. Central Command coordinating search and recovery, Iranian Revolutionary Guard units on the ground and in the air, and the missing weapons systems officer caught between them. The escalation path is clear and narrow. Iranian forces are treating the downed crew as a high-value target for both intelligence and propaganda. U.S. forces are operating under extreme pressure to extract their man without triggering a wider engagement. But this is where it gets serious. The presence of both American and Iranian search teams in the same contested area creates multiple points of potential contact. One mistaken identification, one aggressive maneuver, and the rescue mission itself could collapse into open combat. Most people are missing how quickly the situation has moved from indirect proxy pressure to direct kinetic engagement between the two militaries. The next hours will determine if this remains a search for one airman or the spark that forces both sides into a broader confrontation. Here's exactly what unfolded in the last 24 hours. A U.S. F-15E Strike Eagle, flying a two-man crew, was struck by Iranian air defenses over southwestern Iran, in the Kogiluya and Boyer Ahmad region. Both crew ejected. U.S. Special Forces quickly located and extracted the pilot under fire. The weapons systems officer remains unaccounted for. Verified imagery shows clear wreckage consistent with an F-15. Iranian forces have sealed off the area and launched a ground search. State media is broadcasting appeals to the public, offering rewards for information leading to the missing airman, explicitly urging his capture alive. Simultaneously, during the U.S. combat search and rescue operation, an A-10 Warthog supporting the mission was hit by Iranian fire near the Strait of Hormuz. The pilot managed to exit Iranian airspace before ejecting over the Gulf and was rescued. Iran also reported a separate strike near the Bushehr nuclear power plant that killed one security guard and damaged support infrastructure. But this is where the story changes. The missing American airman is now the focal point. Iranian Revolutionary Guard units and local forces are operating in the same rugged terrain as the ongoing U.S. recovery effort. Multiple points of potential direct contact exist, on the ground and in the air. The uncertainty is deliberate and dangerous. Neither side has full visibility. One side sees a rescue, the other sees an incursion and a propaganda prize. The gap between those perceptions is where escalation lives. What happens in the next window of daylight could lock both nations into a far more direct confrontation than either originally planned. This is no longer about a single downed aircraft. The downing of a U.S. F-15 inside Iranian territory marks a structural shift in the conflict. For the first time in years, Iran has demonstrated the ability and willingness to directly engage high-value American combat aircraft in its own airspace and survive the immediate aftermath. The strategic stakes are layered. First, the missing weapons systems officer represents more than one life. He carries sensitive operational knowledge about U.S. tactics, targeting packages, and electronic warfare capabilities used in the strike. Iran understands this. Capturing him alive would deliver an intelligence windfall and a powerful propaganda victory. Second, the incident near Bushehr changes the nuclear equation. Any attack, even limited, in the vicinity of Iran's only operating nuclear power plant raises the threshold for what Tehran considers an existential threat. Third, the failed or contested rescue mission exposes the limits of U.S. reach when operating deep inside Iranian territory. It forces Washington to decide how much risk it is willing to accept to recover one airman versus the risk of sparking a wider war. What changed structurally today is the precedent. Direct kinetic exchanges between U.S. and Iranian forces are now on the table, not just proxy battles. This incident compresses decision timelines for both sides. The U.S. must now weigh rapid escalation to protect its personnel against the danger of being drawn into a prolonged conflict on Iranian soil. Iran, meanwhile, sees an opportunity to test American resolve at a moment when global attention is divided. The search area has become the new front line. Here's what you need to understand about the decisions being made right now. Iran's leadership calculated that shooting down the F-15 carried acceptable risk. They've spent years hardening air defenses around key sites, especially near nuclear and oil infrastructure. Today's engagement shows those investments are paying off, at least tactically. For Tehran, this is about reasserting deterrence. Every successful hit on an American platform signals to its proxies and to Washington that crossing certain red lines will have direct costs. The hunt for the missing airman is not just operational, it's political. Delivering him, or even images of wreckage and search efforts, strengthens hardliners inside Iran, who argue confrontation works better than negotiation. On the U.S. side, the calculus is colder. The priority is recovering the crew without handing Iran a strategic victory. But the mission has already escalated. Sending in additional assets for search and rescue while Iranian forces are active in the same zone increases the chance of accidental contact. Commanders know that losing the second aircraft, even if the pilot was rescued, reveals vulnerabilities in the rescue playbook when facing determined opposition. The deeper pattern here is misaligned objectives. The U.S. wants a quick, clean extraction to limit exposure. Iran wants to prolong the incident to extract maximum political and intelligence value. That mismatch is what makes the current moment volatile. Most people are missing how this single event compresses the entire regional strategy. Years of shadow conflict are collapsing into real-time decisions about escalation control. What both sides are really fighting for in these hours is narrative control and the ability to dictate the next move before the other side can lock in an advantage. The window for de-escalation is narrowing by the hour, but the other side tells a different story. From Tehran's perspective, this is not an unprovoked attack on American forces. It is a legitimate defense of sovereign airspace against repeated U.S. incursions and strikes near critical national infrastructure. Iranian officials frame the downing of the F-15 and the engagement with the A-10 as necessary responses to American aggression. They point to the proximity of the operation to the Bushehr nuclear plant as evidence that Washington is deliberately testing Iran's red lines. In their narrative, offering rewards for the capture of the missing airman is about protecting national security and preventing further intelligence gathering on Iranian soil. Iranian state media portrays the U.S. rescue mission as a second wave of aggression rather than a humanitarian effort. They argue that any casualties or damage near Bushehr could have been far worse, and that restraint has so far prevented a larger catastrophe. This version of events allows Tehran to position itself as the defender, while turning the missing American into a symbol of resistance. It also buys time to extract intelligence, rally domestic support, and potentially negotiate from a position of temporary strength. The diplomatic angle is equally sharp. Iran may use the incident to demand concessions in any future talks, framing the entire episode as proof that pressure tactics backfire. Of course, this narrative conveniently downplays Iran's own role in escalating tensions through its proxy network and nuclear advancements. But for domestic consumption and international messaging, it provides a coherent counterstory that challenges the American framing of a simple rescue operation gone wrong. The gap between these two realities is exactly what makes control of the narrative so critical in the coming days. What this means for you is no longer abstract. The downing of the U.S. F-15 and the active search inside Iran have already begun rippling through energy markets. Oil prices jumped sharply in early trading as traders priced in the risk of disrupted supply from the Persian Gulf. Any escalation that threatens tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, which handles roughly 20% of global oil, would send gas prices at the pump higher within days. Here's the direct connection. Even limited fighting near Bushehr or along the Gulf Coast raises insurance costs for shipping, slows tanker movements, and triggers speculative buying. That feeds straight into higher crude costs, which then translate to more expensive gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. For American families, that means another hit to the weekly grocery run and commuting expenses. Beyond oil, the uncertainty is already pressuring broader markets. Defense stocks are moving, shipping and insurance companies are repricing risk, and investors are rotating away from assets vulnerable to Middle East supply shocks. If the search for the missing airman drags on or turns hot, we could see a broader flight to safety that lifts inflation expectations again. For everyday life, this is the chain. Higher energy costs, increased transportation and manufacturing expenses, pressure on food prices and consumer goods. Jobs in energy-intensive industries could face new headwinds if sustained volatility returns. Most people are missing how quickly a single downed jet in southern Iran can reach their wallet. This isn't distant geopolitics anymore. It's a live transmission into household budgets and economic stability. The longer the situation remains unresolved, the tighter that pressure becomes. What happens next will be decided in the next 48 to 72 hours. Short term, the most likely path is a high-stakes race to locate the missing weapon systems officer. U.S. forces will continue aggressive search and rescue operations, possibly with additional air and special operations assets. Iran will intensify its ground search while attempting to control the information environment. The danger of direct contact between the two sides remains acute, especially at night or in poor visibility. If the airman is recovered quickly and quietly by U.S. teams, both sides may step back from the immediate brink, allowing diplomatic channels to manage the fallout. But if Iranian forces locate him first, or if another exchange of fire occurs during the search, escalation becomes almost inevitable. Midterm scenarios split into two clear branches. De-escalation. Quiet back-channel talks produce an exchange or negotiated release, cooling temperatures and returning focus to proxy arenas. Oil markets stabilize after an initial spike. Escalation. A prolonged standoff or new kinetic incident triggers retaliatory strikes, possibly against Iranian naval or missile assets. This could close shipping lanes temporarily, drive oil above $100 per barrel, and force the U.S. to commit more resources to the region, stretching forces already managing multiple theaters. The realistic outcome right now sits in the tense middle, managed but volatile. Neither side wants full-scale war, yet both have demonstrated they will accept higher risks than before. This incident has already rewritten the rules of engagement. Future U.S. operations near Iran will carry heavier escorts and stricter limits. Iran will likely accelerate air defense upgrades and proxy activations. The unresolved tension is this. One missing airman has exposed how thin the margin for error has become. The coming days will show whether Washington and Tehran can still pull back from the edge, or whether this single event has set a new, more dangerous baseline for confrontation in the region. What happens next is the real story.